So welcome to Fascia Talks today. My name is Jeremy, of course, and today we're going to explore grounding and tension and tensioning, and I'm sure a lot of other things are going to come into this space. We're going to do a little movement today, a little experiencing fascia, so we can move out of the realm of theorizing about fascia, but actually feel some of the things that we've talked about. First, I want to show you a couple videos just so we can get our brain in the game. So our call to presence today is actually going to be a video of somatics, which you might be familiar with. You might not be familiar with somatics, but it's a way of making sound visible. You might want to plug your ears or turn down your volume because this gets a little squealy. It's just sand on metal plate. Okay. And it keeps fractalizing and becoming more and more intricate. Keeps fractalizing and becoming more and more intricate as the pitch goes higher, which is really fascinating. Let's watch something else that's connected, because we can do that with our own voice. Pretty cool. Pretty cool how we can actually see the result of vibration that we put out there. We don't get to see that. We don't get to experience that the sounds that we make actually can change the geometry inside of the body. Put that all on pause for just 1/2 a second. Let's watch something else that's going to bring us into fascia.
It's the same when using the hammer. Applying a force has no effect on the viscosity. Honey, whether it's warm or cold, is a good example of a Newtonian fluid. Let's try a different fluid. We'll perform the same test with cornstarch solution. When you pour this solution, it appears to behave much the same way as the honey. When you place a ruler into it slowly, the fluid flows around the ruler. However, when you attempt to force the ruler into the fluid instantly becomes more viscous. Hammering the fluid with even more force produces even more resistance to flow. Because a cornstarch solution's viscosity changes with an applied force, it is a non-Newtonian fluid. Unlike a Newtonian fluid, applying forces to this non-Newtonian fluid causes its particles to behave more like a solid. This makes the behavior of...
Now that's really important because our fascia is non-Newtonian. And we want to apply logic and reason to the things that we feel, because the things outside of us generally are Newtonian. and the laws of Newtonian physics apply to them. We can expect their reaction in a certain logical way. But it's unexpected that if you take a spoon slowly into that cornstarch and water mixture, that you can stir it like soup. But if you do it fast, it locks you out, it stops, it stiffens, it becomes absolutely unusable in terms of trying to mold it, trying to work with it, trying to bring your hands into it, trying to pick it up from the bowl, whatever you're trying to do. Too much force and it just locks, it stiffens. And it's fascinating to think of that as an intelligence, that cornstarch and water mixture has an intelligence right there, that it has properties that are intelligent somehow. Let's watch one more something, and then we'll get into ourselves, really. Do you see the red fluid here? Let me try that again. Sorry, you did? Okay. So this is oobleck, the same cornstarch and water. They just put some coloring in it, and they're putting it in a speaker.
That's probably enough. You reckon? That might be too much, actually. Okay. Okay. Alright, ready?
Yeah, ready?
Go for it.
Isn't that fascinating? Really interesting. And I thought just a minute ago, I wish I thought to Google classical music and oobleck, or soothing music and oobleck, or soothing music and somatics, because we'd see how the quality of music affects the way that non-Newtonian fluid reacts. We just heard a song that had a lot of force in it, right? There was a big thumping bass, it was very percussive, and so that oobleck reacted in a very solid-like way, where at the beginning, when it was really soft, there was just like a little wave-like motion, a little soft movement on the top of that oobleck, where it was still more fluidic than solid-like. So I'm going to use this whiteboard and put up some things that we can look for as we start to move, and we'll refer to this and add on as we go, I'm sure. So we're talking about, oops, it's going to be great, grounding, tensioning, tension, and things that come with that. So as we move, let's think about the difference between tension and all that comes with it, whether it's a requirement of tension or a psychological association or an emotional association with the word tension versus the word tensioning. And we'll break that down. Let's make that mean something. And to put some fascia facts in here that we can contextualize. Fascia stiffens with force, becomes compliant without force. We saw that in the oobleck. Its fascia is pre-tensioned, meaning it's always tensioned. It's never relaxed. And we can break that down. That's a biggie. Myofascial continuities, meaning muscle doesn't go from bone to bone, but continues along the line of force, which is called a force vector, through connective tissue, fascia, tendon, bone is even considered connective tissue, into neighboring muscles. I wish that auto corrected me, but it didn't. Oh, here we go. And of course, fascia is fluidic. Kind of a good word to think about. It's not fluid, but it's like fluid. And we also know it's like solid. So these are some things that we can look for as we move in the body. Fascia stiffens when you apply force. It's pre-tensioned. It continues force or energy continues through the body. And when it doesn't, well, that's a problem. That's when we get some blockages or some stickiness or our voice cracks or not so good things happen. How are we doing in this moment? Is there anything that we want to unpack a little bit before we move into a lesson, a little experiential? Let's do a little experiential before we get into the grounding work, just to play with the idea of force and compliance. Take your hands together and press them together, and then release that effort. And then press them together and release that effort. And press them together, and do that a few times to feel how you're creating a force with your hands and it's traveling past your hands. Right? It moves. It moves. And maybe you feel it move through your arms. Notice where it stops. Notice where that effort ends. And it might end for me, I feel like it stops under my armpits somewhere. My lats, my armpits, my pecs, these muscles around here lock up. But if you provide less force, press softer, not only can you probably go further and you'll feel that energy travel past where it was locking before, but you'll also be able to listen to it better. You'll be able to sense it, sense that movement. So you'll be a part of that. You'll embody that more. Opposed to something happening to your body, you're making choices. Notice how the less hard you push, the softer the force, the further the flow. Notice if you're holding your breath. When you really dig in to these subtleties, the nervous system goes on high alert. Is this okay? Are we in danger? And you're like, yeah, we're fine. I'm just doing something new. So we have a sense of it continues. I'm making a force with my hands that goes through me. And depending on how I use that force, it'll either lock or be able to continue. And when energy doesn't continue, when energy doesn't transmit all the way, that's when it develops into heat. If it only gets blocked, if it gets blocked into one area, like if I kept doing this and not ever played with the different force, I develop quite a holding pattern in these muscles because I'm showing my body and practicing in my body, hold here, stop the motion here. This is all I'm doing is pressing here, and I'm going to create a blockage. And this is going to create some sort of pain eventually, but today it might create some heat because I keep pushing energy into an area and stopping it, pushing energy into an area and stopping it. So that's going to get heated and eventually inflamed. And fascia will become denser and stiffer and dehydrated because movement hydrates fascia. So to be able to get this fluidic flow past where it was locking is to actually hydrate and lubricate the area where it was previously locking. So imagine that. Take that into your imagination right now, into a vocal habit that you have or your student has. Just conjure that image. How could you enhance the energetic flow where it's locking up potentially by doing it slower so you can follow the force more, have less force, scale it down. I'm going to add to our whiteboard. So let's do a little grounding work. Let's play with that idea. And that's one of those words that has so many meanings or could be used in so many ways, like placement or head voice. You know, like we have a lot of words that are defined in different ways. So I'm trying to just simply think of grounding to mean my relationship with the ground. how I'm relating to the ground, just to keep it simple. And right now our ground is the chair because it's carrying our weight. And our legs aren't really load bearing right now. They're maybe dangling, or my legs are crossed. So the chair is my floor right now. So if your legs are crossed, uncross your legs, bring your feet to the floor to free your pelvis. Try to be as free as you can to be able to move, have a little space. And we're all on different kinds of seating apparati. So notice if it's soft or if it's hard. And depending on what you're sitting on, you're going to get a better or worse sense of your sits bones. And I'd like for you to look for your sits bones and shift a little right and left between your right sits bone and your left sits bone. Go really slowly, because what we're analyzing here is which sits bone do you put more weight on? It might not be equal. So as you shift right and left, notice if you're breathing, and notice how there's a whole lot of movement besides just movement around your pelvis. But that your torso is moving, your ribs are moving, your spine is moving, your head and your eyes might be moving. And even though your legs aren't physically moving, the tissues around them are moving because you're moving your pelvis. So maybe just feel the fabric around your leg bones just getting a little spiral, clockwise, counterclockwise. And determine which sits bone you tend to sit more on and lean towards that sit bone. So go to the sits bone that you weight bear more on, or just choose one and get to know that sits bone and move all sorts of ways around that sits bone to really try to get a sense of what the sits bone looks like. And it's round, kind of rocking chair-like. So you could rock forward and back on this sits bone. You can also sort of roll out to its outer edge and its inner edge, play around, maybe make a circle around it. And just observe as this takes less focus to just do, observe how the rest of your body is moving in response, in order to not fall down, because your nervous system is making sure you're dealing with gravity. So if you did nothing with your torso, if you just were leaning and stiffened your whole body, you probably need to hold your breath. You'd probably be tightening your core. You'd probably be holding in certain areas, other than, or as opposed to finding these easy natural counterbalances through the body. And then let that fade away for a minute and just sit comfortably. But notice the difference between your two sits bones and the quality of connection to the chair or the bench or the couch or whatever you're on. How one side, the side you worked on, might feel heavier or more directly in contact. And notice the difference between that side and the other side of your body as you do a little scan upwards. Maybe the ribs are expanding asymmetrically. And we're talking about sense. So if you looked in a mirror, you might not see anything, but you might sense a lot using your mind's eye. You may have a different sense of spaciousness in your throat and a different sense of height in your soft palate even. And if you're not sure, that's okay. The more you look, the more you see. The more you look and the more you ask, what's going on in there? What is that over there? Wait, is that forward? Is that back? Sometimes our sense of sight can be paradoxical in the pharynx and in these murkier areas to our self-image. But come back to the same sits bone one more time and do the same thing, but bring a different quality to it, or vary the quality even. Move slower, move softer. Take this exercise we did with the hands and apply it to your sits bone. If you move through any areas that felt like, ooh, that's a little bit painful, or that's a little bit of a pang, right? Maybe decelerate the movement and move a little softer and slower into that area, and find that you could actually create a quality of movement that is more pleasant. by going slower, so you can track the movement more, and you give your system an opportunity to find a better pathway to course correct. And as you're moving on that same sits bone, pay attention all the way up. Maybe watch your soft palate and see what kind of a dance is your soft palate doing, because you're just moving around one sits bone. And depending on holdings in your body, it may not transmit up that far. But just listen. And the less you do, the more you may hear and see and sense. And the more you can reorganize. This is the Weber-Fechner law. It's definitely a more academic way of saying that, but for our purposes, that's how we interpret the Weber-Fechner law. The less stimulus, the more you can develop awareness. When you're working hard, it's really hard to have awareness. But when you're lying down at the beginning of a yoga class, you're aware of everything because there's less stimulus in the system. Notice the differences between that side that you were just playing on and the other side now. I actually feel more resonance on one side of my throat because I've been focusing on how my soft palate and my pelvis are interacting while I'm doing something asymmetrically. All these systems are integrating, that they're not separate from each other, that we can be working with the fascial system and focusing on this fascial system, but that doesn't mean we're not also talking to the lymphatic system, that we're not talking to the nervous system, that we're not talking to the skeletal system, which is really intertwined with the fascial. Well, it's all intertwined is the point. That all this stuff happens in every moment, all the time. We just don't necessarily throw our awareness into specific places like this. Christ training, which is that to be able to see differences in the same moment is really educational for the brain. So to be able to do something on one side and go, oh my God, I do feel my ribs are different here and my throat's different in this way. And then I look at the before side, the side that hasn't received any attention, the side that, or I mean, it has, just not directly because it's all connected. But this side is like, oh, well, that's how it was then. And now this is how it is. And it could be this at all times. And so to be able to hold both the before and after shot in the same image in the same time is really educational for the brain. It's hard to know you learned something until you look back and realize where I was challenged, I'm no longer challenged. So there's a way of sort of having it all happen in real time. Why don't we go to the other side and feel free to be curious, be playful. If your body is really saying no, do a little bit on the left and see how it is on the right. Be playful. This is how we learn to walk. So you can't do it wrong unless you're putting yourself in discomfort and you're holding your breath. So play around with the other side and use the knowledge that you just gained from playing on one side. That, oh, it was very helpful when I used less force, or it was very helpful when I minimized the movement, or whatever it was that you learned in your own experience. Go see how it makes sense on the other side. You could become more skilled at just moving and feeling. Just make sure you're breathing. If your nervous system is feeling like it should hold its breath, hold the breath. You might be doing too much, even if it feels like objectively, I'm not really doing that much. It doesn't take much for the nervous system, but it's just doing its job. So we want to thank you. Yes, Maggie.
Hi.
Wonderful.
Sorry I keep
Wonderful.
bouncing in and out.
Yeah, we are so touch sensitive that it's something to really appreciate. And this is one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about, what I'm learning with fascia and biotensegrity and realities of the body that we just didn't know until we had the research that we have now. But we have a sense called haptics. HAPTICS. I'll put it on the whiteboard. And our iPhones and probably Androids have a haptic setting. And what haptics are is touch sensitivity. And so you can set your haptic settings on your phone to be more or less touch sensitive. So it will feel you, whether you touch it soft or hard, depending on how you want it. And we have haptics in our own body, haptic sensitivity in our own body. And you can feel like even if you push into one hand, just push in, you'll feel the resistance of the tissues, just like the oobleck. Whereas if you just make contact and just start to suggest, I'm just going to just keep going a little bit slower and softer into my hands, and eventually the hand will let you in. It's a dialogue. And depending on where on your body, it might be very different. You know, if you put your hands near your jaw, where a lot of people have jaw tension. And this is really the nature of the gummy worms workshop that I'm doing again September 18th, if anybody's interested, about how gummy worms are analogous to fascia, and how we can learn a lot by working with gummy worms to experience stiffness versus compliance in our own form. And we get tempted because we're taught, we're indoctrinated, work hard, achieve by working hard, but that's not the way it is in the body. Research suggests, but personal experience is the best thing. You know, if you see your student really digging in with their fingers, suggest what would you gain or what would you lose if you did it softer. And it tends to be, you know, the softer it is, the more we can see through our skin with our own fingers. When the tissues stiffen, they block our line of sight. It's everything stiffening. It's everything that becomes, it's the Weber-Fechner law that becomes too much noise for our awareness to get deeper. So it's fascinating. And there's something that I'm really chewing on right now about how our superficial fascia, like the fascia that's in our cheek, and our fatty layer fascia that's on our arm. We don't have superficial fascia over here. There's no fat over here, but the fatty layer is innervated with more sympathetic nerve endings, meaning that they're wired to respond in fight, flight, freeze, while our deep fascia is innervated with more parasympathetic nerves. So it's wired for rest and digest, which makes me feel like I've got this armor and this army around my body that's listening to the environment and going, what do we need to do here to keep everything internally more safe? To keep that rest and digest happening inside. How do I need to negotiate with the earth? How do I need to negotiate with the external forces? So it's a fascinating way that we are made. There's a logic there through illogical materials. Fascinating stuff. Let's come back to this alignment series. So find two sits bones, shift a little right, shift a little left. Find that place where you say, yeah, I think that's pretty balanced. And with your feet on the floor, imagine you're going to scooch the chair back, but don't actually move the chair, but try to move the chair, but it's glued to the ground. So try to scooch the chair back. And notice how you push with your pelvis and you push with your feet. And do that a few times, and you can always play with the pace of it, make it slower, make it smaller, the pace and the scale. But feel the flow. If you were going to push into the feet as if you're going to slide your chair back, feel how that moves from that ground into the chair ground under your pelvis, and then maybe inspires your heart to lift and your head to look up. And let it be led by the floors. So it's like you're pushing your feet pulling your feet back to push your pelvis back to lift your heart up and your head up, which is really talking to the extensor muscles, how we extend our spine as one continuous myofascial action. And if you look at the pictures of the spine, you know, artists' renditions of the spinal muscles, you'll see they're like braided. They're looped. So they all communicate with each other. And if you were to push into the ground of the pelvis more forcefully versus less forcefully, feel the differences in your system, how your system creates a different sense of stiffness to compliance. More force? Less force? And I don't want to suggest that more force is bad, because we need it. We need to be able to have the stiffness in our system. It's really important. I like to use the analogy of walking into the wind. We don't have to think about how to negotiate our stiffness. We just stiffen as wind comes our way, right? And if we didn't know how to respond to that, it would just blow us over. Right? But instead, we walk into the wind and we're like, oh gosh, I gotta, and I start to really stiffen through my system. And stiffness to my integrity of my form is really important. My little push puppet here is stiff, and it's because he's got stiffness in the wiring in his fascia that he can stand up. But when I push the little button in the bottom and add slack to the wires, can't get anything done, useless, no integrity in its form. It needs the stiffness. And this is a good example of biotensegrity, which is all about the forces of push and pull in the body, and tension and compression. Continuous tension, like this one wire that's in this thing, and discontinuous compression, all these separated bony-like compression struts. And it's held together through its continuous tension. It's the tensioning that gives this form its integrity. Now, it also can't get a whole lot done here when it's fully tensed, right? But it can stay tensioned and do a little bit of stuff. But if I let go of all the tension, nothing. And we are born under tension, and we stay under tension. And if you imagine everything relaxing when we went to bed, what a chore it would be in the morning to have to put everything back in place. Put my muscles back on the bones, make sure the tricep goes where the tricep goes, bicep goes over here. Here's my stomach that goes over here, the spleen, I'm gonna tuck that under. We don't have to deal with those things. We are tensioned in place. Everything stays where it's supposed to stay because of tension. Fascial tension. So tension is a good thing. Problems happen for sure. Body gets confused, energy doesn't flow, and we create compression in certain areas, or we disturb the tensional compressional balance. What are our thoughts right now? Let's catch up. And saying tension is good. Are we okay with that? And when we're singing different things, imagine, like we tension ourselves differently. If I'm going to belt on stage versus sing a classical aria, I'm not going to say one is more tensioned than the other. They're differently tensioned. They're just differently tensioned. I use my body in a different way. In fact, come back to this little movement, this little rocking on two sits bones, and notice it's probably easier, more coordinated already, just because you took a break and you're coming back to it. And that's part of the way the body learns on a different time scale. Likes breaks, and it likes lots of little practice sessions with lots of little variations. And think about these two shapes. There's two shapes. One where the chest lifts, the gaze lifts up towards the ceiling a little bit. And if you go the other way and push your feet forward without physically moving them, right? You start to want to look towards your navel. Pull your feet back, look towards the sky. Push your feet forward, look towards your navel. And don't just do the feet and the head. Wonder, how does this energy flow from my feet to my head? Can I go at a pace and at a size where I can see it, where I can follow it? And try not to will it, try not to predict. Just have an experience. And we're exaggerating two shapes in our body. But think about which one looks more like belting and which one looks more like classical singing. Right? There's a connection we could make here. There's a reason why we see belters looking up. And there's a reason why we see the eye line of classical singers more at the horizon or just a little under the horizon. that what we see is what we hear, and what we hear is what we see, that they're linked. They are linked, and the things we see on stage, the lunging and the knee up and the crazy squint, and it's all doing something. Whether it's all good somethings, we can unpack that, right? But it's helping in some way. It's helping this singer, this performer, get to where they're trying to go. Now, looking at the same continuation in a different way, because everything is connected, you could lead the same series of movements through the arms. So let the hands dangle by the ground. I'm bringing them up so you can see them, but let your arms be, I want to say relaxed. Let them be long. Let them hang with gravity, and turn your thumbs out, and then turn your thumbs under, and turn your thumbs out, and turn your thumbs under. And you're focusing on the thumbs, but follow the spiral through the arms. How does turning the thumbs out make your elbows want to move? How does turning your thumbs under make your elbows want to move differently? And if you let your arms continue to rotate, the whole arm is rotating in as you're rolling the thumb under. The whole arm is rolling out as you're rolling the thumbs out. Internal rotation, external rotation, and start to listen to your torso and your pelvis. How does your torso want to move as you turn your thumbs under? How does it suggest a connection to these same movements? And if you're not sure, try both. Turn your thumbs out and look up. Turn your thumbs under and look down. See how that feels a few times. And then do the opposite. Turn the thumbs under and look up. Turn the thumbs open, out, and look down, hollowing the front body. Turn the thumbs under and extend. Turn the thumbs out and up and flex forward, looking towards the navel. And then play with those ideas. How do they go together? What would be most logical? And this is a difference between top-down learning and bottom-up learning. It would be a really different lesson if I said, okay, we're going to line the body by lifting the heart, eyes a little bit above the horizon, thumbs out, turn out your arms. Right? That's a really different way of getting to the same shape from this is a right answer, go do this now body, versus I'm moving with my body, I'm feeling my body, and I'm building on, and I'm having an experience, and I've got a few things in my space, like if I feel any pangs, do a little less, or make it slower, make it smaller, use that Weber-Fechner law to be able to stay aware, not create too much noise between my awareness and my sensation, and start to build a sequence where I can see, oh, actually, when I lift my heart, my arms do tend to want to roll out. Oh, that is something that is true to my form. Or right now, my arms feel really locked. They don't want to move at all. And that's something really important to notice. Because when we put muscle, the mind, into the matter, we are essentially saying it doesn't matter what your body knows now. It doesn't matter what your body's experiencing now. What we're going to do is ignore it and put right answers into it, just right answers. And we haven't really done anything to somatically re-educate the body. We just put a pattern on a pattern. But the underlying disorganization is still there. And that's where Feldenkrais, Rolfing, yoga even, if you bring a good mindset of connection into it. There are some really great somatic education modalities out there now. Alexander, of course. How we doing? Thoughts, feelings, questions? One way of interpreting that is when I find myself in this extended posture, I recognize joy. Or I see this as an emotional expression of my body. Another variation and interpretation of what you said could be, oh, I'm feeling emotions bubble up because I'm moving in such a way that's letting the energy flow where it was blocked. The latter. Very good. Yeah, you're speaking to the way the body learns, and I was just talking a little bit about that. How you want to give it an experience, and then you want to give it some time off, and then come back to the experience and give it some time off. The body learns through diverse experiences held together with an intention. So if my intention was grounding right now, we're having not just an experience of pelvis into the chair, but also how that moves through me in a variety of ways. And this is the way that the complex adaptive systems that we are can self-organize. And that's the best. When we don't have to keep saying, stand up straight, stand up straight. We show the body a bunch of different things so that it spontaneously self-organizes to be more efficient, and we don't have to cue it. We don't have to tell it what to do. We just work with what it knows today. And then build on. Tracy, you had a comment or a reflection. Cool. Yeah, I love that. And that's my favorite word to use with well, anything educational, but I teach yoga and I'm always talking about nutritious movements, which is not mine. Now, I credit my friend Rachel Tudor, who's a body worker, who talks about nutritious movements. And it's just such a wonderful framework. Am I giving my body something that's helping it feel more nutritious? Or am I just being ambitious? Ambitious or nutritious? Ooh, I love that. Because we can be really ambitious with our body, and our body doesn't want that. Our body wants time. Our body will form. Our fascia is partly, one of, I like to say fascia is the organ of force transmission, feeling, it's carrying our emotions, and also perception. It's our organ of perception, but it's also our organ of form. 3 F's: force, feeling, and form. They've done dissection, and I shared an image of this from cadaver dissection, where they dissected out the bones and muscles instead of throwing out the fascia to see the bones and muscles. They got rid of the other stuff, the stuff that traditionally was considered the important stuff, and what was left was the form of the body. Looked like a suit. So fascia changes and morphs and is always changing its structure depending on what we do. It's very live. It's a live matrix. And if we continue to do something over and over again, it will start to form to accommodate that choice. So if I start to belt over and over again, but I've never belted before, then I might not be able to belt very well today, but I'm growing fascia in the way that I need to grow fascia. Depending if I'm needing more stiffness, more compliance, I'm forming my body around my behavioral intention. And so it takes more time because it's literally creating more of itself. It's not in limited supply. We have and this is where it gets really kind of a little otherworldly, that it's a decentralized, I think Wendy and I, we were talking about this, it's decentralized control. It doesn't check in with the brain, at least not like other systems check in with the brain and are led by the brain. It's listening to the outside and it's listening to the inside, and it's responding to forces, it's responding to intentions, and it's extracellular, meaning if the cells are what's communicating with the brain, this is outside of the cellular matrix. It doesn't have a lot of cellular components, and the cellular components that it does have, I love the name, are called fibroblasts. Blast is the word in the body where we create something, where clast is where we destroy it. So fibroblast can create more collagen. When we tension something, we send a signal to our fibroblast that we need to create more collagen, versus when we compress something, we create a signal to our fibroblast that we need to create more hyaluronic acid, which makes the fascia glidy. Fascinating stuff. So depending on the intentions we bring into the body will create more of what we're asking for it to create. So if we're just saying, I want to sing the high X and it doesn't matter how, I'm creating stuff to support that choice. Is it going to be the most efficient way? Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? But bringing in the properties of fascia into voice work, we can use the realities. Ooh, Adam has a juicy comment. We can use the realities of our form and let that become a part of our pedagogy, because no matter what, who is in the room with us has a body. And that body is non-Newtonian, and the body responds, and it will respond to force. And so if you put big force into it, it'll respond in the way that it responds, whether you like it or not, right? Fibroblasts are also a big receptor of pain if things aren't going well. Correct. It's part of the communication network. Love that, Adam. It's a fascinating system that operates like a small world network. And so we can apply small world network rules to it. Other small world networks are starlings in flight, flocking patterns, murmurations, where all each bird needs to know is who's around it and how far away to stay from its neighbors. So simple flocking rules, but we see macro shapes in the sky. Schools of fish the same way. And yesterday, and what a beautiful place to put a little cherry on this time, I was listening to a podcast with my favorite Joanne Avison. I'll post it in the Body Talks with JMOS group. If you aren't in that group, go join. I've been posting research, and some discussions are emerging there. Body Talks with JMOS. But another example of the small world-like network is a symphony playing. How each player has a component, has a part to do, has a job to do, but the way they have to maintain awareness of everything else is what makes the symphony sound beautiful or out of tune, out of time, out of sync. Kind of a neat little image. How the body is a symphony. And how all the processes have to be in sync with each other. And we do have a lot of synchronized things in the body, a lot of rhythms, right? There's a lot of rhythms built right into us. So how do we bring those into harmony? Thoughts, feelings, impressions, questions, musings. No, not at all. And I don't think it's woo-woo at all. I don't think it's esoteric at all. There's a great book called The Brain's Way of Healing, which is Norman Doidge wrote The Brain That Changes Itself, which is a commonly known book. The second one is The Brain's Way of Healing. And in that, there's a chapter devoted to vibrational healing. Mm-hmm. And he's talking about neuroplasticity. Now we can connect the dots, neuroplasticity and fascia, because we know vibration, our fascia is a vibratory wave conduction system. It's a wave conduction system. We take a step on the earth and it sends a wave through our fascia to instruct the rest of the body how to stay upright, how to go where we're going. So fascia is susceptible to vibration and sound. Absolutely. It doesn't not carry sound. We are vibratory beings. Ah, that's beautiful.